There's 40 million more millennials than there are our generation out there. Gen Z is huge. How much? And they're all, by the way, the millennials, about ready to start having families and enter their peak work era.
And we know they're buying homes now, too.
Everyone's like, oh, they're going to live in Brooklyn and ride a bike. No, they're not. Once you have a kid crying in the next room, you want a little more space.
You move to Westchester. That's what happens at Morgan Stanley. Everybody goes to Westchester and starts having kids.
Yeah, exactly. So how big is that going to be from a macroeconomic perspective going forward?
Yeah, so let's get out of the short-termism. It's extremely important what the Fed does here, how trade continues to roll on. But if we take a longer-term view, as you said, Gen X, we didn't hold up our end of the bargain.
We're kind of worthless.
And millennials were a big deal. It's a huge demographic. But here's Gen Z. The leading edge of them are graduating from college. They're now going into the labor market. They're hitting the labor market at a time when we've got the tightest labor market, as opposed to millennials who had to delay their careers quite a bit. So Gen Z is going to be jumping out there and competing for housing with millennials. So we're going to be underbuilding multifamily. This is just their sheer size and growth in the labor force is bullish for potential GDP. It's long-term bullish for a secular bull market in the U.S. for equities. It means we're putting a floor under interest rates long-term. We're not going to be Japan. And it's long-term bullish for the U.S. dollar.
It is. Listen, I've given speeches on this. The number one age in America is 27. There's more 27-year-olds than any other age.
We're very
Numbers
young.
2 and 3 are 25 and 26. Yeah, they've got student loan debt. I get that. But they're going to start entering their peak workforce years. They're going to get married. They're going to start having children.
They're much better equipped to pay back those student loans compared with millennials. And they're not going to have to delay purchasing decisions as millennials had to. Think about this.
Especially if rates stay low.
Exactly. Now, on the global stage, how do we compare? No one across G10 comes close to this size of demographic we have. The youth boom in the U.S. is massive. And it's going to dominate into the 2040s. Think about this. We've got labor force growth growing about a 10th faster than the CBO. That doesn't sound like much. But when you look out there, it delays the insolvency date of the Social Security program by 30 years. So these things matter a good deal, and we just don't focus on
By the way, and if you're not listening to what Ellen is listening, if you're a Gen Xer, if you're in that mid-40s, the mid-50s range, this is great news for us, right? Because we're going to have 40 million more people working when we're retired.
Exactly.
We should be okay. It's also, you mentioned equities. This is a big deal, okay? And people say, oh, you're always biased to the upside on CNBC. Here's the thing. There are 50% fewer stocks now than there were 20 years ago. There's 40 million more potential investors out there. 40 million more buying a pool of assets that has shrunk as private markets have grown. Is that a long-term, big bull case story?
It's a multi-decade story for top-line
This is long.
growth.
We're talking long-term.
Yeah, we're talking long-term, right? Getting away from the short-termism that we've got right now, which is understandable with so many things buffeting the expansion right now. But this is multi-decade, long-term story. Economists will tell you that demographics make the world go round. And this is huge because it sets the U.S. apart on the global stage. Look at China's demographics.
It's terrible.
They're horrific.
They're awful.
They're terrible. And then you look across other G10 partners of ours, and no one has the size.
Italy has a negative birth rate.
Yes, exactly.
In fact, Japan's boom time. A lot of our viewers remember the 80s and 90s. They were buying everything. The Nikkei was at 40,000. You know why? Because the majority of the Japanese population was about 35 to 50 years old.
Yeah. So here's the other thing about the U.S. Hispanic is the fastest growing segment in the U.S. It's the fastest growing for total population. It's the fastest growing in this Gen Z demographic, and they are now the majority in that demographic. And we owe that benefit partly going back to Reagan's amnesty program back in the 1980s. This is how you don't know the consequences of your actions until decades later in terms of immigration. We want to be sure that we don't hamper immigration today, because we could find out in a few decades from now that is actually hurting U.S. growth.
Because like 100 years ago or last year, the impoverished migrant today could be the business creator of tomorrow. And their children going to college and creating all that wealth and economic prosperity.
Yeah. With the immigration policy that Reagan put in place, we're able to give those undocumented immigrants help them become more full economic citizens, buying homes, having bank accounts,
I love it.
And the like.